I was basically living in a Honda Fit, and I would use my podcast and say, hey, if you want to host me in your city, I will sleep on your floor in your house with my sleeping pad. I had a tent in my camper. I would sleep in their backyards, and I would basically just go to where people could host me. From there, that evolved to like very sketchy Airbnbs where there's like domestic disputes happening like overnight. And I was like, why am I here?
Welcome to Seacoast Stories, a podcast about the people, businesses, and newsmakers that make the Seacoast an American hidden gem. I'm Trey Farkas, and on today's episode, how the host of a decade-old podcast found freedom by sticking to his principles, despite it costing him hundreds of thousands of dollars. Today's story starts in May 2024. I'm a month removed from a live podcast for my old show, which I hosted at the Music Hall Lounge. By all accounts, it was a great success. 75 people attended the show, even though they had no idea who I was. They likely came to see my three guests, Stephanie Polini from Three Bridges Yoga, musician Sam Robbins, and Lainey and Lou's Jennifer DeRosiers. We told stories on the night, gave advice, cracked Taylor Swift jokes, and made a tangible difference in people's lives. And when I reflected on that night and the ensuing weeks, I realized that Seacoast people are just built different. They're ride or die with supporting local. And I concluded that if I could build something, people would come. But I didn't know how to make that happen. So I sought the help of my new friend Jennifer, who also offers one-on-one business coaching. So, on that first sunny day of spring when it feels like the world is waking up from its long winter slumber, Jen and I sat on a bench outside Lainey and Lou and put our heads together. With the birds chirping and smoothie machines blending, we brainstormed how I could take the energy from that night and turn it into something with more staying power. And that, my friends, is when Seacoast Stories was born. More on that at my next live event on January 9th. Ticket link in show notes. But Jen also told me that day about someone I should connect with, a guy named Eric, who hosts the Restaurant Unstoppable podcast. I prodded Jen for more info, and she told me how Eric travels the country in a van and interviews restaurant owners on his show, that he's been doing it for 10 years, and that it's his full-time job, which for me, a podcaster who loves traveling, just sounded like a dream come true. Unfortunately, we never ended up making the connection. That is, until Eric DM'd me a few weeks ago. He told me he'd heard about the show, that he was back in town for a few weeks, not far from his hometown of East Kingston, and that we should get together. And so we did, last week at the Portsmouth Library. He showed me around his van, which took 2 seconds, and then we walked inside to record this conversation. And in this episode, Eric and I will discuss how he discovered podcasts long before I did, the financial and emotional challenges of life on the road, why he believes the restaurant industry is in a terrible place, why he prioritizes freedom over everything else, and his first career as something completely different, which is where today's show begins.
So I grew up in the restaurant industry. My parents had a restaurant. They talked me out of opening a restaurant because they know how hard it was. They convinced me to pursue a different career. I thought I would go make a bunch of money, getting a real job, and then eventually I would retire early and then do my dream, which was opening a restaurant when I was, 15, 16, 17. So for me, the plan was to become a commercial pilot and to work hard, make a bunch of money, retire from aviation, and then live my real dream, which is a horrible idea. Now that I know what I know, don't do that. But really, the reason why I chose aviation was because I think I've always wanted freedom. Even since I was a little kid, I just remember looking at birds and just being like, those bastards can fly to Florida right now. It's cold, it's dark, that's the coolest thing. I chose to become a commercial pilot for all the wrong reasons. I love the idea of the lifestyle of being able to travel, go wherever you want. I was very naive. But I'm the kind of person that when I put my mind to something and I say I'm going to do it, I do it. So I became a commercial pilot.
The lifestyle of aviation is something I'm somewhat familiar with. I dated a girl who was a flight attendant for Delta.
Okay.
And
that's scary.
She was gone 4 days a week and had 3 a.m. wake ups and 3 a.m. arrivals. I could not fathom what that lifestyle was like. So you grew up dreaming of this lifestyle. Did it match the expectations that you had, or was it better or worse?
No. I mean, well, I fell in love with the idea of becoming a commercial pilot pre 9/11. The life of a commercial pilot was much better before that time. I really became a commercial pilot for the benefits of being a commercial pilot. I thought I would like to operate and like fly an airplane. Like that was cool. Like the idea, the act of flying was cool, but I wanted to be able to jump seat and travel the world and go eat at different restaurants. The reality is the world of being a commercial pilot is very restricted. You're not free. You're flying lines and clearances and altitudes that are determined, and you have to focus on those altitudes and those headings. You have monitoring technology. So, okay, more about me. I have horrible ADHD. I'm dyslexic and I'm colorblind. I should have never become a commercial pilot. It cost me $200,000 between school loans and just taking multiple tests over and over and over again to pass. Most people would have done it at $100,000. I had to take most of my lessons twice.
Wow.
Which is embarrassing to admit. And then I was like terrified of that, just ashamed. But it's also a testament to like, I just don't give up. Like I just keep showing up. And I think I got pushed through the system because people saw that like, I want it. I work my ass off. And it's weird to say this out loud, but like I was always told that I'm likable and that while I'm not the best pilot, people could see just traveling with me because like you're a good time. And in the world of aviation, like that's 90% of it. Like, can you see yourself being stuck in an airplane with this person for 8 hours a day? Like that's really, if you have the qualifications and you can fly, then what they're hiring for is personality. They're hiring for culture. Like, are we going to be able to stand you? And people liked me and they pushed me through the system.
How difficult was it flying, given the ADHD, the color blindness?
It was tough, man. Well, the color blindness, I mean, I got a statement of demonstrated ability. It really wasn't that hard, but it was the dyslexia that was the scary thing. So I chose to resign from aviation when I was 26 years old. I had it in my mind that when I got to my goal, when I made it to the regionals, when I became a commercial pilot, the learning would be over, the testing would be over. I had anxiety, man. I would wake up in like the middle of the night with like sweats about like a test I had to take. I would find myself entering numbers into the computer system backwards, like the navigation system backwards. I was worried that I was either going to lose my license or I was going to worse hurt people, you know, and that was on my shoulders every day. So after the age of 17 to 26, almost 10 years of my life, $200,000 investment, I had to look in the mirror and say, am I doing what I'm meant to do? Is this what I'm supposed to do? And it was clearly, blaringly obvious that I leaned my ladder against the wrong building. I climbed to my destination and I said, this isn't the roof I'm supposed to be on. And I had to climb back down and start all over with $200,000 of school loan debt.
Many people in their careers have that same moment that you just described. They look themselves in the mirror, they say, I'm not happy, and they think about an alternate life, but many of them just stay trapped in the same old patterns because we would rather, even if we're in a bad situation, we would rather face a bad situation that we're familiar with than enter into unfamiliar territory. That's people's biggest fear. So I'm curious for you, why did you decide to get off that ladder rather than just stay on it because you knew what that was like?
So like you don't make a lot of money as a budding commercial pilot. You have to take jobs reporting traffic, being a flight instructor, flying really sketchy airplanes around the islands of the Marianas, which is what I did. I was a charter pilot in the Pacific Ocean, flying Asian tourists around. You don't make any money, so you have to supplement your income. So I was working in restaurants and I always found myself looking forward to my part-time job. I was doing the thing I loved to support the thing that would provide the lifestyle I wanted. So I had it all backwards. So I think the clues were always there. You know, I wanted to stay in the restaurant industry. I grew up in the restaurant industry. And for me, it's really the people in the restaurant industry that I love. I used to think I was passionate about food, but what I've learned is that I'm passionate about what food has the ability to do. Food has the ability to bring people together. And I think that's why I love food so much, is because it's this tool to like bring people together. And I think that's what I love to do. Plus the restaurant people are just the best people out there. The most real, passionate, authentic, hardworking, take me as I am, unapologetic people. I love them. And the most caring, giving, hospitality, warmth, generosity. Like, who better to spend your work days with than people in the hospitality industry? So like, I just kind of knew like I'm just not meant to do this. Also, when you're 26 years old, your frontal lobe starts rounding off. You become more self-aware. You start to become aware of what you're good at and what you should be doing, what you like. I think that was kind of it for me. I got to where I wanted to be. I achieved my goal and it wasn't better. So I'm like, why am I still doing this? Like, I'm 26 years old. It's not that late to start over, you know?
So you decided to start over. What did you do?
Well, I wanted to work in the restaurant industry. That's all I ever wanted to do. But I created a situation for myself when I was $200,000 in school loan debt. I'm not going to be able to pay off my debt working in restaurants. I'm not going to be able to open a restaurant with $200,000 of debt. So I thought to myself, if I can't work in restaurants, I want to work with restaurants. And the thought then was, well, I will get into sales because you can make good money in sales. And people have always told me, Eric, you should get into sales. So I was like, well, if I have to sell something, what do I want to sell? Like, the idea of sales never sat right with me because I think sales carries this air of manipulation, greediness, selling things to people that they don't need. So I was like, well, what do restaurants need where you're not necessarily selling, but you're serving? And I always admired the role of a som, because what a som does, or what a wine rep does, is they really work with the restaurant to serve them and to find wines that work with their food. So I was like, well, I'll learn about wine. And I got a job at a local vineyard, Jeweltown Vineyards in Southampton, New Hampshire, like the first winery in New Hampshire that specialized in Labrusca, which is like...
I didn't know we had wineries on the Seacoast.
Yeah, man. So went there and I was the assistant winemaker for a year and I just learned all about wine. Learned that wine is amazing. I definitely do not want to be a winemaker because I'm not a chemist. But opened up my eyes to the world of wine. But more importantly, during this time, I discovered podcasts. That's when I discovered this world of podcasts.
And what year is this for context?
The summer of 2012.
I'm a junior in high school. Okay.
Yeah.
What were the first podcasts that you were listening to back then? Because keep in mind, this is way before the boom of podcasting. First legit podcast ever was 2004, but it was just like recorded audio. Podcasting didn't really start to become a thing until 2014, which is when Serial, which I'm sure is a podcast series that a lot of you have listened to, that was kind of what put podcasting on the map.
Yeah, and the smartphone.
Yes, exactly.
You can now take your computer with you. Before
Yes.
It was like you had to sit at a laptop or a desktop. But now that we have these mobile computers, that's when podcasting started to catch traction.
Yeah.
So I discovered podcasts because I had a Professor David Mazers, Great Bay Community College, walked into our sales class, wrote his name on the board. Hello, I'm Professor David Mazer. First thing he said, literally, he looked around, he said, raise your hand if you listen to podcasts. Not a single 18 to 25 something year old in that room raised their hands. He just put his head down, walked out of the classroom. You could see him look left. You could see him look right. And he loudly says, "You've got to be fucking kidding me." And I'm in a library right now as I'm saying that. Sorry, Portsmouth Library. And he says, "You are missing a giant opportunity to literally learn and discover any subject you're interested in." Before he even taught us anything, he gave us our first homework assignment is to go home to search 3 subjects and to find one podcast for each one of those subjects to come back and tell us what you learned. So my 3 subjects were marketing, entrepreneurism, and the restaurant industry. Tons of marketing podcasts, tons of entrepreneurial podcasts, not a single restaurant industry podcast. So I failed my first assignment. But I told him I couldn't find anything, but I found all these podcasts around people sharing their knowledge. And I was just listening to all these people like making money online. So I was working at this winery 8 hours a day, listening to all these podcasts at ×2. And I just found like the roof for me was just blown off. Like podcasts led me to audiobooks, and I would just listen to like literally 16 to 18 hours of audio a day, depending on how busy.
Gosh.
Just like working by myself in the cellar, just like learning, getting inspired. And there were 2 quotes that I heard that were kind of the kick in the ass I needed to start the process of starting my own podcast, which was, if you make your life about helping enough other people achieve what they want in life, you can have anything in life. And the second one was, if you're looking for something and you can't find it, there's a good chance that you're not the only person looking for it, and there's an opportunity there. I was looking for a restaurant business podcast, couldn't find it. And I wasn't in the position to open my restaurant or to work in restaurants, but I was in the position to learn about how it happens, how to do it right, to create that entrepreneurial podcast, but for the restaurateur, and to help enough other people who were in the position become successful. And that was my focus. If I can't do it, then I'm going to help other people doing it just by going out and creating this resource where I approach restaurateurs and I say, how'd you do it? So it was like this backdoor entry into the restaurant industry. And I was always worried because I didn't own a restaurant. Like, who am I to teach restaurant owners how to be successful?
To your point, because I was wondering about this, you didn't have any media background or podcasting background or any education in that way. You had worked in the restaurant industry a little bit. You worked in the winery, but you didn't own one. You weren't high up at a restaurant. Did you feel any sort of imposter syndrome about like,
yes, 100.
I'm not qualified for any of this?
Yeah, to this day. But I think that you can choose to take on different personas. And because of that imposter syndrome, I was very intentional about being the student. I'm not the expert. People don't turn away students. When you come in and you say, I'm a student, I want to learn from you, you're kind of stroking the ego a little bit, and you're also lowering their guard. I'm just a student. I'm not your competitor down the street. I'm not looking to open a restaurant in your market. I'm just here to learn. And it's flattering when you approach somebody and like you say, I think you're the best in this city. How'd you do it? Teach me the way. To this day, I don't consider myself an expert. Have I learned a ton? Yes. But I always try to keep the mentality of student first. So my core values are, we have integrity. We are students. We are educators. We are communicators. We are collaborators. We show up. We're fiscally responsible. We have fun. And I've recently added, we are free, because I've learned through taking personality tests that is my biggest core value.
I imagine at the beginning, again, podcasting was so foreign at this point to most people that when you were coming to these restaurant owners and chefs saying, hey, I want to highlight you on my podcast, I imagine even regardless of you not having the most experience, they would be open to it. A, people love talking about themselves. So, and free marketing as well. Right. And B, everyone's always looking for different ways of marketing. And this was such a different way than I'm sure anything that they had been approached about before.
Yes, that's what you would think originally, but you got to think, who's my target audience?
Right.
So my target audience is a global and national audience of other restaurateurs. So there isn't quite the draw for a restaurant owner to come on my podcast and to share their business secrets. If anything, I was afraid that they'd be like, why would I come on your podcast and share all my knowledge with my competitors? I was afraid, and the restaurant industry kind of had a reputation of holding its secrets close to its chest because it's a very competitive industry. So I was like, who's going to like open up and give me this information? And 10 years ago, 11 years ago, there was that kind of like, who is this guy who thinks he can come in here and just like, let me share my secrets? But it was mostly people were receptive. The way I positioned it, I'm like, hey, I'm here to really make an impact in the industry. I think that so many restaurants fail. We need to start working with each other, sharing knowledge. Look, all these other people are doing it in different sectors of all these tech people they have no secrets. Why do we have secrets? Like, is it because we have secrets that we are stifling each other? And we are arguably the second or third largest industry in the world behind healthcare and the government. And we are like the lowest income industry. Restaurants open and close every day. Like what's going on here? What's the issue? Like, I think part of the issue is we don't support each other. We compete with each other, or traditionally it was about me being better than the person down the street. And what I've learned is the opposite. It can be other restaurant owners and you can open businesses together, and it's when those people that come together and share information that rise to the top. So how do we share information in Exeter with the people, or in Portsmouth, but not just in New Hampshire, but like in California, in Texas, in Chicago? Like, if we can collectively just start sharing stories and knowledge and perspective, what's working in this market, what's working in that market, then we can transform the industry. And my mission statement is to change the world through inspiring and empowering the restaurant industry, because if we can transform the industry, I think the restaurant industry has global world transforming power. But that's like what was the original question? Man, my mind just goes.
I don't even remember, but that's totally okay. So you felt like it was soul crushing work in the aviation industry. And when you started this podcast, Was it immediately, yes, I love this. This is exactly what I was searching for. I feel whole again. I feel like myself.
Yeah, man. I instantly felt like I had purpose. I felt like I was an imposter commercial pilot. You know, like I did the work, I earned the ratings. I was a commercial pilot. I have the license, but like I was surrounded by people who just excelled at it. Most people drop out of the program. I'm too stubborn. I'm afraid to quit. You know, I should have dropped out because it would have been the right move for me. When I did this, I was leaning into all my strengths. My skill set is social and emotional intelligence. And being a podcaster sitting across the table from somebody is all emotional, social, being personable, going to people, being a student, getting them to become vulnerable, to trust me, to open up, to share their knowledge, but also their weaknesses, their vulnerabilities, their struggles, their challenges. And I put people in a safe place to be able to do that. So like I'm 100% doing the thing I'm meant to do today. And I'll be honest, it's been a financial struggle since the very beginning. I started this podcast with $200,000 of school loan debt. I was working in restaurants, doing Uber, and recording 3 episodes a week. Editing, promoting, selling ad space. It's been a fudging grind, dude. But I'll pause there in case you have a follow-up question.
Yeah, the early days of that grind, you had started doing them remotely over the internet long before people were really doing that. So you were using Skype and whatever other else existed then, right?
Right.
And then you eventually transitioned to doing them in person, making a vow that you would only do in person.
Yeah.
Why was that so important to you?
The goal was always to do it in person. I think the quality of a podcast is better in person. I am putting a studio quality mic in front of you. I have HD 4K cameras. I'm shooting in your face in your beautiful restaurant environment during off hours or during business hours where there can be restaurant background noise because it's a restaurant business podcast. It makes sense. The communication, eye contact, body language, tone, pheromones, I'm sure comes into it at a certain level subconsciously. My heart energy, my passion radiating towards you and sharing this thing. The communication is better in so many different levels, but the most important thing is the relationship that's built in that moment. The 1 hour I'm there before we hit record, setting up, talking, briefing them on what to expect. Then the 30 minutes breaking down, like, wow, that was really cool. That was almost therapeutic. Like, I love what you're doing. Thank you so much for sharing my story. Who else are you talking to? I don't know. Who else should I talk to? Oh, you should talk to this person, this person. Okay, cool. Do you know them? Absolutely. Will you make an introduction? Sure. By the time I'm leaving that interview, he's or she is on her phone texting their friends in that community saying, you need to do this podcast. This dude is doing amazing work. And it just blossoms. That's why I live in a truck camper, because now I don't have to just go for a week at a time. I just go and I just let the story pull me in any direction. I don't know who I'm going to talk to. Maybe 2 or 3 people when I get to a city. That turns into 15 or 20 people.
Wow, there's so many things I want to talk to you about. Okay, so let me go here. The early days financials of it all. Were you sustaining yourself? You had $200,000 in debt.
I'm still $100,000 in debt.
Wow.
So I think it took about 4 years for me to get to the point where I could sell ad space. And that was another challenge because now
I want to underscore that point. Sorry to be rude. For all the podcasters out there, there's 6 million podcasts out there available to be listened to right now, titles on Spotify. At any given point, only 10 to 15% of them have put out an episode in the last month. That's because podcasting is incredibly difficult. It is such a grind. You did it for 4 years.
2 to 3 episodes a week.
2 to 3 episodes a week before you ever even made a dime. So many people get into podcasting. They realize, wow, this is harder than I thought. Time-wise, it takes more than I thought to do a good job. It's not blowing up overnight. What the heck? And wait, there's no money for ever.
I mean, it took maybe 2 years to start making money. It took 4 years for me to be able to, I think it was 2018 when I went full time on the podcast. So that was enough for me to pay my school loans and live out of a car, basically. I think I was charging $75 an episode and I had 3 sponsors an episode. So I was making about not a lot of money.
$225.
Yeah. I think maybe 5 or 6 years in, I was a 6-figure podcaster. But after tax, after operational costs, traveling all over, I was
employees.
I have a contract editor, Jared Parisi, Sumadri Podcast. He does great work if you're looking for an editor. And I pay him right now about $3,250 a month to edit 8 episodes, video and audio.
And when did you bring him on?
He's been with me for about 8 years. Right around the time I left to go on the road to travel to get the content, I was like, Jared, I can't travel, interview 5 people, 6 people a week, all on site, and do the editing. Like, do you want to do the editing for me? So I basically taught him everything I knew and removed myself to do the biggest lifting part, which is the editing. So 2018, I was basically living in a Honda Fit, and I would use my podcast and say, hey, if you want to host me in your city, I will come to your city. I will sleep on the floor in your house with my sleeping pad, and I'll interview people. I had a tent in my camper. I'd sleep in their backyards, and I would basically just go to where people could host me.
And when you say people, you mean the restaurant owners themselves or fans?
Listeners,
okay.
People who listen to the show. So it was like a listener supported show. And then from there, that evolved to like very sketchy Airbnbs where there's like domestic disputes happening like overnight. And I was like, why am I here? Eventually it was less sketchy Airbnbs. By 2020, things were like looking really good. Like 2 episodes a week, 3 sponsors, about 2,000 a week, about 8,000 a month was what I was bringing in. So right around $100,000 gross. That was put on hold for 1.5 years because I couldn't travel. So I was back to remote interviews. I launched Restaurant Unstoppable Network, which was a membership where people could come together and I would host live events digitally, and you could get to meet my guests. You could meet the tools and services and technologies that were being recommended to us organically. We're doing workshops. Around 2021, I was like, okay, I can get back on the road. At this point, I think in 2022 or 2023 was my best year. I made $203,000 gross. I think I netted $80,000 after travel expenses and all this other stuff. At the end of 2023, I was like, I'm paying $2,000 a month for rent. I'm home not that often. I was like, I could move out of my apartment, put my living expense towards my travel expense, which was about $1,500 a month at that time. $2,000 a month is what I was spending. I was basically traveling once a week every month. And I was trying to get 12 episodes to 10 episodes per trip. So I was jamming all these interviews into 1 week, doing 2 interviews a week. And I was like, I could just live on the road full time in a truck camper, which you had the pleasure of visiting me in this morning.
Great place.
Yeah, a little tight. And I could just live on the road for like 3 or 4 months and try to get 4 to 6 interviews done a week, find a little bit more balance. And every month I'm on the road, I can get 1 to 2 months of content scheduled into the future. So go on the road for 3 or 4 months, come back, let that ride out, work on the business, go on the road for a few months, come back, and like find better balance. That's kind of what the last year of my life has been like, just going on the road and just doing more investigative journalistic work.
Hey everyone, it's Troy. The first live Seacoast Stories podcast is going down on Thursday, January 9th at the Press Room. Throughout the night, I'll speak to 3 previous guests, Ray and Ryan Lambert of the River app and Katie Marshall of Studio One, as well as new guest Crystal Hicks from Job Talk. Not only will audience members leave with some inspiration and actionable advice, but also the opportunity to win cash prizes, get big discounts at your favorite Seacoast spots, and more. Tickets are just $19, and I promise you will get more than your money's worth if you buy one. Plus, Seacoast Stories shirts, hoodies, beanies, and stickers will be available, as well as something else that you'll find out about very soon. To be a part of this special night, you can visit the link in the show notes and guarantee your spot today. I can't wait to see you there. Now back to today's episode. Two episodes a week, all on site. You go to the guests.
Every state in the country.
Every state in the country. It's truly incredible. I mean, just this show, 1-man band, 1 episode a week. I don't have the full video episode component. This is such a grind that you are doing. What keeps you going? How do you find balance? Do you take any time for yourself? Are you always working? Because this show consumes me every waking hour of every day. I can't imagine what yours is like.
I could be better about finding balance, but I think when you find, I don't know if I believe in work-life balance as much as I believe in finding your life's work. And when you find your life's work and you find your definite purpose in life, when you feel seen and valued, when people write to you and say, you're changing my life. My goal when I started this podcast was to figure out what the path to success was. I wanted to like put the spotlight on like this path. By 2018, 4 years in, I was like, I'm more confused now than I was when I started this podcast, because the more you learn, the more you realize you don't know anything. So I think you were asking me, like, do I feel like I have work-life balance? Dude, when you are serving people and you're just insatiably curious and you're constantly learning, like freedom is my number one core value, right? I have freedom to choose who I talk to choose my purpose. I have freedom of time, freedom of relationships, freedom of purpose. Arguably, I don't have freedom of money quite yet because it's tough.
Do you have freedom of time though? Just because you have these obligations to your listeners. Hey, you're expecting these 2 episodes a week at this video audio quality at this time of day. You're giving so much of your time to your listeners, right? Because you're serving them so much.
Nobody's holding a gun to my head and saying, go do this. Every promise I've made, every commitment I've taken on has been a choice. It's been my own will. I don't have an overlord. Everything I'm doing is because I want to do it. So in that sense, yeah, I do have freedom. I will say in 2023, I learned a hard lesson. I think there are 4 freedoms. There is freedom of time, freedom of money, freedom of relationships, and freedom of purpose. I was prioritizing freedom of money in 2023 because in my mind, if I had the money, then I could do everything else. And I started getting into sponsorship agreements and accepting terms with sponsors that was forcing me to prioritize freedom of money over freedom of relationships, over freedom of time, and over freedom of purpose. My purpose went from serving restaurant owners to help them become more successful in life to serving sponsors. A great book out there to kind of shine light on this is Power in Progress by an MIT professor. And the argument of that book is whoever controls the technology is the only beneficiary, the true beneficiary of that technology. So we are in this world where we're being sold all this new technology, and marketing is there to leverage your emotions and your weaknesses and your vulnerabilities to say, you need this. You need more time in your life. You need convenience. We don't need any of that shit. All we need is safety, security, relationships, freedom of growth, freedom of purpose. Those are the basic Maslow's hierarchy of needs. And we lose sight of this stuff. So when I say marketing is the bane of human existence, I'm not saying you don't have to market yourself. I'm just saying we are a victim of this world that is just consumed by marketing. Like, you don't know what's real. You don't know what's fake. So when I started taking money from these sponsors and my rates were high, I went from $420 an episode to now I have all these video assets. I have this branding on my camper. Like, gold is $100,000 a year. I have room for 4 sponsors. I could potentially make $400,000 a year with my podcast. Going into 2025, I'm choosing to say no to all of that because I was being pulled in way too many different directions. My content, like, now it wasn't just ad space. It was, okay, well, we want you to feature our CEO on the show twice a year. We want you to go get testimonials for us. We want you to not put our content next to other people who are in our space who are our competitors. So power in progress. Whoever controls the technology, controls the agenda, controls the narrative, controls the vision of the industry. If I'm taking money from people, I am now working for them to push their agenda, to push their narrative. I'm manipulating reality and truth to sow somebody else's reality and truth. I felt like I lost my purpose. To your point, it's not easy. I'm driving all over the country. I'm doing 2 episodes a week. The only way I can do that and stay sane and happy is if I'm doing it for me and my listeners. So I put myself in this position. Like, I'll be fucking honest, dude. It's hard. I'm an emotional guy too. Have you had anybody cry on the podcast yet? I've gotten 4 people to cry, so congratulations. It's a good feeling. No, like personal checking accounts. And then negative business checking accounts. I was happy last night because I got $70 to come in to my business account randomly, like an hour before I lost propane in my camper to just stay warm, dude. I'm not trying to be like over dramatic. It's just fucking hard, man. But it's worth it because of freedom of relationships, choosing to promote who I believe in and who I trust, freedom of time to go to where I think there's a story, freedom of purpose to serve, a purpose to like literally make an impact, and freedom of money does not trump those things, dude. So I guess like that's how it's possible. You know, like when you ask like how do you do that? Like, dude, when you fill those cups, anything else is possible. And you have to have faith that if you exist to help enough other people achieve what they want in life, you can have anything in life. And as soon as you start to sacrifice what's best for everybody, then what's the fucking point, dude? Like, why? Like, I'd rather go get a job, you know? So, yeah. Then like, have to, like, serve somebody else, like, you know, like, no, I don't know, man. Sorry.
You're good. Thank you for being honest, because it is hard. And I have tremendous respect for you for sticking to your principles. A lot of people have principles, but don't stick to them, especially when money is involved.
You can bring a tissue in here for your guests in case.
I know, right?
God, what a horrible host.
I know. I'm so sorry. So what changes have you made or are you making going into 2025 to ensure that you don't fall for those traps again?
So right now we're trying to figure it out. So my goal was to say, hey, like I don't need to make $300,000. I need to make enough money to cover my school loan bills and to feed myself and to pay my camper. So I'm trying to prioritize freedom of relationships over freedom of money and saying, listen, if I have to survive going forward, not just sell ad space, but to have to collaborate on content and to promote these companies to get by, then I'm going to choose who I believe in based off of the data that I've gotten to say, okay, well, if I have to promote you, then I'm going to approach the company that I believe in and say, hey, I could make $100,000 on this ad space, but I am choosing to make $60,000 because I want to promote you because I believe in you. So it's weird, man. Like Toast POS is the number one recommended POS on the show, right? By far. Like
point of sales?
Yeah, point of sale, Toast POS. Great company in terms of like technology, user experience, customer service. Like there's a reason why they're being recommended. Back to the power in progress. I'm like, wait a second, like this is a great company. I'm not trying to talk shit about Toast, but like absolute power corrupts absolutely. And when there's one company that has 60% market share or 50% market share, if they're heading towards domination in the restaurant industry loses because now you have a monopoly and now you have this company that can dictate rates because humans are like, it's in our nature to go with number one. We save energy wherever we can. And if we know something is like number one, we're just going to go to the default number one. So where I'm going with this is like, we have to be conscious of this because if we're going into a future where the rich are getting richer and the poor are getting poorer, you're seeing it with restaurant owners, you're seeing it with big tech. So I kind of guess to answer your question, not only do I feel like this burden to like promote the tools and services that are being recommended organically, but also like I'm like tapping the brakes on the industry and saying, listen, like we have to be careful about making these companies too powerful because if they get too powerful, then the industry is going to suffer. So like I feel like this obligation to not just make money, but to make change, to live. Why do we have a mission statement? So we get back on center line. You know, why do we have core values? So does this align with my values? No, then I can't do it. My mission is to change the world through inspiring, empowering, and transforming the restaurant industry. So like if money takes me off course from that, then I can't do it. It keeps us honest.
You don't have any temptations to go throw your values by the wayside so that you don't have to, so that you can get the propane to warm yourself up in your van. You're already living as frugally as possible.
Dude, to be honest, dude, like I literally was like texting my girlfriend last night. I was like, I got a funny story. I was like, I just ran out of propane. And I think it's funny because like I literally had like $1 in my checking account. And then like At 7 o'clock, I get paid $72. I'm like, sweet, I have a little bit of cushion. At 8 o'clock, I run out of propane. Shit. I don't have any propane. It's 20 degrees outside. My lines are going to freeze. I'm going to be cold tonight. Wait a second. I just got paid. I can fill a tank for $22. I can fill both tanks for $40. I just got paid and I still have an hour to get to Home Depot to swap out my tanks. So like when you live on the edge, dude, you acclimate to that and you're like, yes, you know what I'm saying? Like,
and you realize you need, back to your point about the hierarchy of needs, you need way less than the world tells you.
Right. And I was literally just telling her like, it always works out because she knows I'm stressed out. I'm like, I get stressed out, then I just breathe. Then I go, it always works out. It literally always works out for me. Like I walk a tightrope and I dip into the negative and like something happens and it works out. So like when chaos is your normal, like it just works out. And like, I think after just saying that to her, like immediately after, like I'm in this situation and I feel like there's always somebody looking out, like I'm not like a religious person, but I do believe in karma. And I think when you exist to do good things, if you choose to do the hard thing, you just have to have faith that like it will work out. Like I don't ask for help, but if I was in a situation, I could have called hundreds of people in the Seacoast area and could have been like, hey, do you have a tank of propane I can use? So like I could be better about asking for help. I could be better about promoting myself, which is why I'm here, because I'm like, I need to get the word out because like I'm doing good work and I should be proud of the work I'm doing.
So the reason that I call myself a former nomad is because I live here now on the Seacoast. I'm planted, and as long as I can afford it, which big F, I want to be here. But I used to travel, not in the crazy fashion that you did, but I would live somewhere 3 months at a time, just long enough to really feel like I was there, to really soak up every aspect of that different culture, and then I would go. What was so difficult about that lifestyle was it was so hard to establish meaningful relationships with people. It was so hard to feel like I belonged anywhere. And I now feel that on the Seacoast, but it's because when I moved here, I overrode that urge to just go, because I have this weird thing where my comfort zone is chaos. My comfort zone is new, is unfamiliar. Sitting with the familiar and the repetitiveness of that is difficult for me, but I made the decision to stay here and it's finally paying off for me. But when I was on the road, I was so lonely. It was so hard. And as you talk about your lifestyle, traveling around the country in a small space that you often feel like the walls are probably caving in on you, emotionally, what is that lifestyle like?
That's the hardest part, for sure, like without a doubt. If I could change one thing, it would be to have a person or like a steady relationship in my life. And I think, is life on the road for me forever? I hope not. I think the plan is to live like this, to sacrifice now so I can find balance later, to increase revenue, to have enough influence and recognition in the industry that if I'm coming to town, I don't have to spend all my time networking to find people. Like network remotely and then come to town for maybe a month and get people come to me and have a team of people around me running around, grabbing the B-roll. And I'm literally just showing up for the interview.
Dream.
Yeah. So like, or getting to the point where like I have enough draw and influence in the industry where I can Joe Rogan fly him in. But you got to sacrifice in the short run to have that long-term success. And for me, this is like, I don't want to say it's my final ditch effort, but like the reason I'm living this lifestyle now is because you have to be willing to live more unreasonable than anybody else. If you want to be the best, if you want to make an impact, it takes sacrifice. Like I talk to restaurant owners and there is arguably no other career where you have to sacrifice so hard. But like when I just talking to Justin Walker from Walker's Maine, and he's talking about like the hours he puts in and the sacrifice. And I'm like, I get it. It took him 17 years of sacrifice to get a Rising Star Chef nomination. 17 years of working 80 hours a week to get a Rising Star recognition. The irony of that, he worked for Arrows for Mark and Clark. I don't know if you know that restaurant, but they won multiple James Beard awards in like the 90s and like early 2000s. He was, for a big chunk of that, like he was like their executive chef. Like it takes so much time. Like I know that I'm going to be a 10-year overnight success. And I'm going to come out of nowhere and people are going to be like, where did this guy come from? He's been doing this for 10 years. He's published over 1,100 episodes. So like I've seen the other people's stories. I know what it takes.
You're inspiring me as we speak, as I think about my podcast, and an unexpected issue, maybe not an issue, but just something that came up that I wasn't expecting when I started this thing was strangers coming out of the woodworks telling me about what they do, and I do this thing on the Seacoast, and I would love to be featured on your show. And I'm sure this has happened to you.
I mean, I did it to you.
Yeah, exactly. Now, luckily, I knew of you already, and you had already been recommended to me, so you were on my list. But people I've never heard of, doing things I've never heard of. Hey, I want to be on your show. Product services that I'm vastly unfamiliar with and kind of uninterested in, at least at first glance at the message. It's hard for me to deal with that because, like, everyone has a story to tell, and everyone deserves to have their story told. Who am I to tell them that they're not important or not worthy of coming on my show? But I'm limited in resources. I only have so many episodes, and I want to say yes to everyone. The reality is I can't, and you can't either. How do you deal with the inquiries out of left field? Do you say yes to all of them? If it's a no, how do you kindly say no?
So there's like this saying in the restaurant industry, when you're training people, you don't correct the person, you correct the process. So I'm not saying no to people when they reach out to me. The process is saying no. Thank you for reaching out. I've added your guest or your client's name to my list of potential guests in the show. If they're referred to me, I'll be in touch. So like there's a process. So the whole reason why we create systems and processes is so we can remove ourselves from the business. So the business doesn't depend on us. You create a process, you create a system, you can delegate that process to somebody. So for me, I'm not saying no to people when they reach out to me. And sometimes people reach out to me and I'm like, holy shit, Charlie Charler, just like if he was still alive, like, yeah, please be a guest on my show. Every once in a while that happens, but if I don't immediately recognize the name or the brand, if I'm not like immediately pulled in, then I just say thank you so much. But my priority, my North Star is word of mouth, which is probably one of the reasons why my show hasn't blown up, because I don't chase vanity metrics. I'm really intentional about doing the right thing. I think we live in a world right now where it's getting harder and harder to do the right thing. Like restaurants are a great example of this. It is getting harder and harder to serve sustainable food and to pay your employees a livable wage, to offer them insurance, to give them work-life balance, because you can't make money if you do it. So what is wrong with the world where it's getting harder and harder to do the right thing? It's getting harder for me to do the right thing because in order for me to grow my podcast, I need to focus on vanity metrics and getting people on the show that have big followings to promote my podcast. I intentionally go after people who are not looking for attention, people who are restaurant operators, who love doing restaurant work, who don't care about the media, which is an issue because it's getting to the point where you literally need the media to survive today. And we need to create awareness about it because like media is getting out of control. So did I over answer your question again?
That's totally okay. You've been doing this for 10 years, 1,200 episodes?
1,143 was recorded yesterday. Today is going to be 1,144.
That is so insane. That is an insane output. What keeps you going?
I'm insatiably curious. I love serving people. If I'm not going to do it, who is? We all point and say, somebody needs to do something about this. But change doesn't come from the outside in. You can't wait for somebody to come change something. If my mission statement is to change the world, change happens from the inside out. So like it happens for me trying to create these systems to have discipline to do the right thing. And then whenever change has happened, it comes from a person drawing a line in the sand and saying, come with me, and pulling people and influencing people. And when you lift yourself up, when you create these disciplines for yourself, you can lift other people up. And that's really at the core of what I'm trying to do with the podcast is I'm trying to, through lifting myself up, through learning from all these different people, creating an opportunity for restaurant owners across the country to lift themselves up with me. And when a restaurant owner can turn around and lift up their team, and then their team can turn around and lift up their guests, and when those guests can turn around and lift up their community, if you have this happening all at once across the country, the restaurant industry does have the power to change the world. So I think that's what drives me, is knowing that the second largest industry in the world, who's the closest thing to life and I love anthropology, because if you study where we came from, it's so easy to figure out where we need to go. And our whole evolution has centered around food and cooking. Like, they say the scientific revolution came from hunting, because you have to literally use the scientific method to stalk and study your prey, to find the data and the habits and the routines, put the trap here. Oh, cool, that worked. Sweet, we got it, we killed it. Chemistry, cooking. We learned chemistry from cooking our food. We were able to grow our brains from saving energy by cooking our food. Botany. We learned botany from growing, like agriculture. Like, the need for science evolved around food. Everything we have done from our existence has evolved around food. Today, where the fuck are we, dude? Food is literally a commodity. Food is labeled next to coal, silver, gold, sand. It's life. Food is literally life, with the exception of salt. If you eat it, it was once living. It is not a commodity. It is literally life. We are all connected. If we continue to center everything back around food and sourcing food holistically, sustainably, we can create opportunity for people. There's so much opportunity in doing that. We've gotten so far away of what it means to be human, dude. Food has always shaped and steered life. I think it's going to be our saving grace. And the only way we're going to do that is by educating restaurant owners, to educate their staff, to educate communities, to say, what the hell are you doing with your money? Where is your money going? Is it a new pair of shoes? Is it infinite streaming services? Is it OnlyFans? Where is it going? Where are we spending our money? Like, all we need to be happy is to have safety, to be seen, to like grow. And like, there's so much opportunity in the restaurant industry to check all those boxes if we choose to put our money where it matters, into our food system. So I think that's what drives me.
Food is something that I think a lot about as a diabetic person. It's something I always kind of have to monitor what I put in my body. But ever since I took a nutrition class my freshman year of college and really learned what was in food and what food was, it completely changed my worldview. I'm an ingredient reader, and if there's an ingredient I can't pronounce, and I'm like, I don't want to put like diophosphate sorbolexin in my body. And that's just the norm. That's accepted. Do you think in the United States, where it's such a big country and capitalism, do you think it's ever going to happen where we get back to eating natural things, real things all the time?
Yeah, man. Conscious capitalism. Vote with your dollar. If you don't want that shit in your food, don't buy it. Where is your money going? I think this idea of consumerism, this like, there are things we can do to keep our happiness that aren't necessarily aligned with this idea of like the nuclear family. Every mom and dad has their own house, and every child has their own bedroom. And we have the dining room and the formal dining room and the living room and the family room. Like, what do we need, dude? Where is our money going? Do we need to spend $1.5 million on a house, or even $500,000 in a house? Do we need to have 4 people living in that $1.5 million house?
One of my favorite stats, the average American household has 300,000 items in it.
Consumerism is the issue. This idea of like selling things. And there's a whole addiction around that of just like Amazon. Again, back to marketing, dude. We have everything we need to be happy. We're learning more and more about the brain and what the brain needs to be happy, what the body needs to be healthy. And all of that leads right back to food. We evolved alongside our ability to hunt and gather and grow food. We can be happy if we go back and we study, what were we doing 10,000 years ago? What were they doing in the Amazon jungle? They had abundance. I've heard stats where like we can't produce enough food to keep people alive. That is the most malarkey thing I've ever heard. We can literally plant a seed anywhere in most places and have food grow. We just need more people, more time, energy, and resources going towards our food system and creating a sustainable, going with the grain, what the Amazonians were doing, where like the jungle was their food source. They just nurtured, they let nature do its thing. And they just like, they were stewards of that. We can be stewards. We can, like, how much time and energy would go? How much opportunity would there be if people put their money into the food system, and how much purpose could people have? So there's no better feeling in the restaurant industry than saying, here, eat this. Do you like that? Is it good? Do you feel good? Am I giving you something healthy? Like, why people get in the restaurant industry is because there's a pattern. Why do you do this? I love making people feel good. We are addicted to dopamine. And one of the best ways, there's a reason why there's so many like drug addicts in the restaurant industry, because we love that hit of dopamine. And you can get it by being seen. When you see somebody, you feel this thing, dude. It's the next most important thing above it's physiological needs, security, and then being seen. It's that powerful. If you take the time to see somebody, that's literally all we need. The rest is not that hard. It's just so plain as day. And I think that we just need to get the word out. And I'll stop talking because I just, once you like get me going, bro.
You're passionate. I'll let you go in a few minutes. You got to get up to Manchester for another interview. You've spoken a lot on today's podcast, Eric, about what it means to be happy, what it takes for us to be happy. And I'm just wondering, are you happy?
I mean, I am. I mean, like, I have oh shit moments. I get stressed out. But again, when you find your definite, like, I've self-actualized. I have purpose. I'm growing every day. I'm constantly proving myself wrong. You know, I have the opportunity to have freedom of choice, freedom of relationships, freedom of purpose, freedom to listen to whatever information I want to listen to. I mean, am I being seen and valued for what I do? Yes. Do I get the instant gratification from that? No, because I don't get to experience the people who are experiencing my work. I think there's a disconnect there. So getting those emails helps. Traveling across the country helps because I get to meet people who listen to my show and they get to tell me how much I'm serving them. But to your point, yeah, I mean, the biggest thing missing from my life is like that consecutive that person who I can talk to every day, who I can share my challenges with. I mean, I did recently meet somebody. I don't want to jinx it. So
you have a girlfriend. So
I do have a girlfriend.
That's the somebody?
Yes. Okay. You know, and I'm at this point where like in less than a month, I'm going to be gone for 3 months. So like, am I going to choose my career over this relationship? Am I being transparent with her? Like, do you know what you're signing up for? Is she going to like having to come visit me on the road or me fly back? I think if it's the right person, you can make it work, but I don't want to jinx it, but I feel hopeful. Yeah.
Well, I'm hopeful for you too, Eric. I thank you so much for joining me and for sharing the wisdom that can only be gained through 1,100 episodes, traveling the country across 10 years. It's truly an unmatched resume. We have one final question. We ask this same final question at the end of every episode, every week. You've already answered it, but I have to ask it. What is the mission that you are on? My mission statement is to change the world through inspiring, empowering, and transforming the restaurant industry. That's Eric Cacciatore, the host of Restaurant Unstoppable, which has new episodes out every Monday and Thursday. Links in show notes if you want to check it out. As for this podcast, there's one more season 1 story next week, and then the program will take a holiday break until the live show. But don't worry, I'll have plenty more for you while I'm away. You'll see what I mean. Make sure you're following the show on Apple or Spotify so that you get all the latest episodes. That's it for today. But if you see me around town this week, maybe at Chapel in Maine and Dover, Flamingo's Cafe in Exeter, or enjoying the Miracle at the Go, please stop me and say hi. I would love to hear your story. Until next week, everybody, live free or die.